This is Valerie Armstrong, creator of Kevin Can fucking Sell.
So if you ever talk about it, it's Kevin.
Just say that.
Yes,
For Valerie, and be very clear about that. And Silas Howard, who's a director on Dickinson, among other things. And movies and all of the things. All right, so let's get into it. So so I'll preface it with this. So this is going to be a conversation a lot about, devices used in storytelling. Obviously, both Dickinson and your show have a very specific points of view and also use multiple different devices to tell their stories. So because it's just us as well, I'd like to not be super general. I'd like to really kind of go into the minutia of it if we can. I guess I'm going to start with you, Valerie, since this was kind of something that came from a kernel of an idea and then now is, watchable and a thing that we all love. But where did this come from? What was that kernel? And tell us about that initial spark.
So I was listening to a podcast. I'm pretty sure it was Janet Varney's, and it's called the JV Club, and it's just women talking about what it was like going through high school, and it was my Bible, and I was 28.
But there were two women on there. I feel like one of them was maybe Casey Wilson, and they were talking about pilot season and how they still go out for the sitcom wife every year, auditioning. I was like, I would offer any of these women anything. And I was also an assistant, not able to offer anything to anybody at the time. But
That's not true.
no, I could offer coffee. I was great at I was so good at coffee. If any of you are wanting to be a writer, be so good at coffee.
Coffee and copies.
Oh, yeah. And so I was like, that sucks. And they talked about how they always are told by their agents, we really want a funny woman for this one. And then they get the sides, and the sides are all what do you mean? They're just setup machines for the men. And I thought, well, that sucks even more. And then I read that Erin Hayes was being killed off of Kevin Can Wait.
Oh.
And I was like, hell no. Where's her show? I want to see more about her. How did she end up there? And then the first format switch popped into my head. And I texted my brother, who's here today, and said, can you imagine Kevin Can Wait, but the wife steps into the kitchen and then it's Breaking Bad? I said, is that just a scene? Can that be a whole pilot? And now we have 2 seasons of it. It's crazy. And I sent that text, I looked it up, I sent that text, it'll be 5 years ago in 2 days, which is crazy. So thank you for not saying
But you know what's so cool is that that idea, that 5 years ago idea, is what ended up on screen.
It's almost the same. I can't say enough about a network that didn't beat me down and take away everything I loved about it. It changed a lot, as it should have. I wrote it alone in my pajamas, and when it becomes a bigger idea with other people, it should get better. And I think it really did, but that format switch is the first format switch of the show. And it is it is what I wanted it to be.
Yeah, that's
What else could I ask for?
That's amazing. And also, what I love about that show, especially just where the pilot ends, is it leaves you, it inevitably leaves you wanting more, because A, you're like, what did I just watch? But B, it's you, speaking of surreality versus reality, I wanted to know immediately which one's real, which one's fake? Are they both fake? Are they both real? And I feel that hook, it even kind of continues on. You start knowing what's real, but then you keep questioning it.
To me, that it's all real. A decision I made very early on was it's not in her head. She is not crazy. It is not a show within a show. It is just the way this world is presented. Mm-hmm. And I think if you make that decision, you also then have to orient the viewer with rules.
Yes.
So I call Kevin, Neil, and his dad Pete sitcom catalysts. If they are on camera, it will be a multicam 3-camera sitcom. That's where these guys get to live. It's like a privilege because they don't have to deal with any consequences. They get to live those sitcom plots and have it be at everyone else's expense their whole lives until, I don't know if anybody watched it, but the last episode, Neil loses that privilege.
Yep.
And he's going to be in single camera this season. And he is, Alex Bonifer blew me away this year. He's so great in the second season.
Yeah, he literally crashes into the other world.
And it was so much fun to shoot. It was so, like, the day that we shot the single camera part, our playback guy, Frank, stitched together the multicam and what we had just shot, like, in 30 seconds. And I was like, oh, thank God it works. Okay. It's going to be good.
That's awesome. So you brought up rules, which Silas, you and I were talking about. And on Dickinson, there are several different storytelling devices between her writings and then, like, you know, the modern takes on things and where she goes. So I guess just speak a little bit, especially just for people who maybe haven't seen that particular show, on which ones they are and how they function on that show.
So Dickinson is a half-hour comedy set in the world of Emily Dickinson can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
In the 1860s. And the rules of the world are the past is present, so there's a sort of an anachronistic quality to the show, but a lot of the characters and the details are facts from Emily's life, so it's a real mix. And the other rules are, we are in Emily Dickinson's mind, so anything goes. There's, you know, a bumblebee that she's talking to and dancing with when they have a big, like, party night where they do opium, and in the opera episode I did, there's this whole meeting that she has with the opera singer that still, you know, you don't know if that's happened or not, or part of it happened. So it really navigating this space that is where she lived in her mind, because she, you know, didn't get out of the house much, as it was told. But it's reimagining her as this teen goth, obsessed, you know, with death. And Death is played by Wiz Khalifa. And he's really awesome to work with. And he does straight up smoke a joint on the set. COVID's like, he can't do that. I'm like, you tell him. But he's like really, really great to work with. And it is looking at, so this third season was, the first season was the patriarchy stopping her father. And the second season was, what if that's not in your way, do you stop yourself? And celebrity and the idea of being seen. And then this season is the Civil War, so it's all about the war in the home, but it has a storyline because Emily Dickinson corresponded with this Colonel Higginson, who was an avid abolitionist. They corresponded for 20 years, and he was a big influence in saving her work. And he was the colonel of the first all-black troop that fought against the South. And so we have, because the show also has humor in it, you know, we have all of these young comedic actors and sort of, like, again, pushing against the rules and allowing humor to be in the midst of trauma, you know, and having that kind of tonal shift. So yeah, there's a lot of weird rules, not rules, but yeah, that's the setup for it.
I loved it, by the way. I saw every episode at least twice.
Awesome. Yeah,
What I find, like, so surprising is that, like, that's a lot going on, right? And similarly in your show as well. I mean, it's just but you have to get everybody on board with all of that, or else it can fall apart. It's like, it can't just be you abiding by the rules or following the rules, and you've got all these different departments that you've got to kind of, like, mandate this stuff to. So I guess maybe just talk about like, when you have very specific, you know, stylistic things, like, how do you go about, like, what's the process of collaboration like?
For us, it was finding department heads who looked at their department as the most important in the show, in a great way. We had people who understood the concept and applied it to their role in ways that I couldn't have told you they should have, because that's not my department. I want to hire people who are great at their jobs, trust them to do it. You know, it's like when I'm in editing sometimes, I don't say, like, can we... Sometimes I do, but but there are times where I'm like, this is what I want to feel in this scene. Can you... I trust you to go do that. And if you hire the right people, they will go do that. Like, I couldn't have told you that up close, Allison's sweaters have holes in them, like little ones that you wouldn't see in multicam. I couldn't have told you how to convert my multicam set to single cam, but my production designer did it. And the first time I stepped into that living room as a single camera set, I was like, this is exactly what I wanted. It's the same place, but it feels like every living room I went in as a kid, not a set anymore. But like I recognize everything. And having people who, hair makeup was incredible. It's like on multicam days, those ladies are done up and look great. And then single cam days, you are up close and it doesn't look like we've changed it. It just looks like you get a better view of it. And watching all of that sort of happen was one of the great joys of my life, because the development process is like you got to believe in the vision of the show when no one else has it. Right. And sticking to this one at times was hard because I trusted it worked in my head. But we didn't have a pilot. And if any show should have had a pilot, it was this one. And that first day in the editing room, I was like, oh, thank God. Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. But yeah, I think it's, if you have a lot going on, if you have a big idea, you find people who are excited by a challenge, not people who are like, journeymen who just feel like kind of showing up and getting paid. If you want people who get excited by like a new creative challenge.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely you want a lot of people that are not yes in a bad dysfunctional way of supporting people when they shouldn't be, but not yes men, but really, oh yeah, here's a problem, there's a solution, let's find it. Because if you're afraid of problems, then film is going to be a miserable ride. It's just problem after problem. And but then there's always a solution, and I love that part of it. And I also liked what you said about, the first thing that you said now just escaped my mind. Oh, it was about the setting up the show. Well, it'll come back to me.
Hiring good department heads? I don't know, I've had mezcal.
Yeah, what's in your cups?
Hey, some sodas. Okay, so it'll come back to me. But I was just thinking about setting up the rules of the world, and Dickinson, it definitely is one where you have to give people permission to laugh in places that they shouldn't. And so that's something like even my movie that I'm finishing right now is it's a sort of Mean Girls meets Sixth Sense. So she sees dead people, she helps them cross over, and it's really about a friendship and about transforming loss. And so I need a chuckle at the funeral and a laugh at the scene where the head cheerleader dies. And that's a tough thing to pull off. But it's because it's gallows humor. It's not laughing at. It's sort of the way that we all survive. And I feel like as part of a group of people, trans, LGBTQ, our stories are often told like, here's the trauma. We'll take the fun stuff, the art, but you can keep that trauma. But trauma and humor, I think, always just go so well together. They're usually a byproduct, and so yeah, I think that setting up those rules are really important, and having, being willing to push, but you have to let the audience know soon. It feels like.
Yeah, and something I realized helps with that incredibly is music. I asked for a certain song to play over the last scene of the show before I saw the editor's cut, and I just wanted this end bit that is kind of creepy and fun, but really I think poignant, and but she put the whole song over it, and the beginning of the song is like jaunty, and I was like, wow, that's not right, that's not what I wanted, but also somehow like that scene is coming off as fun, and it shouldn't, like I had to, we took it out, but it is crazy how a little bit of like levity in music makes the tone completely different and allows for so much leeway and humor.
It does, yeah. And if it's a movie you want to have a little more, pensive moments, you can put that, do the opposite. I think counterpoint music is a great way.
Oh yeah.
To eke out more from a scene. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I mean, in the pilot of my show, there's a fantasy sequence where she stabs her husband in the neck with a piece of glass, and blood is everywhere, and it seemed so dark. And then we added like just percussion over it. And then what really made it funny was we cut to Mary Hollis Imboden, who plays Patty, just clapping, and all of a sudden it was like very funny. And I was like, oh, this is what I want the show to be, because I laugh unfortunately, at every funeral I go to. Not because I think it's funny, but because I am so desperate, I think, for some levity that, like, my brother and I were at a funeral once. I'm not proud of this, but we are not churchgoers. We never really spent any time there, and it was I think our high school English teacher. And the office was really big at the time, and thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. We both thought that's what she said without saying it. We both knew and started laughing and couldn't stop and got looks. And that is how I describe the humor of the show. Like, that is how I want the show to feel. Like, I'm laughing, and I can't believe I just laughed at that.
But honestly, like, that is more common, I think, than you assume that it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that's why it ends up ultimately working and connecting.
I mean, a lot of people laugh because
like,
they're nervous, right?
Yes.
And it's sort of a release, and so it makes sense.
Valerie, talk about the, like, there's almost like a going even inside a secondary layer when we're in single cam, and then she has this like fantasy element with Kevin. Was that always a part of it, or like how did that kind of become a thing?
The original pilot I wrote was so different, and I'm so glad that we made the changes we did. I mean, Allison, like, knew she was miserable, knew that she hated her life and her husband, but just, like, resigned. She was a lot more like Patty. She just, like, resigned herself to it. And she was, like, doing coke on the streets at night to survive, and then found out she was pregnant. And that's, like, the thing she couldn't deal with. Like, she wouldn't resign her kid to this life. And that changed over the course of time, and what we came to instead, which I think is right, is like, this woman hopes. She still has hope for so much, and she has really internalized what she has been told she should want. Everything is about what she thinks she should want and what will make her happy. And to her, that is through Kevin. What fascinated me was, what is the psychology of that woman, and what is her past that made her think that? And so to get at that, what really helped was looking at this like idealized version of her future. And for the pilot, it's Kevin looking different, having in a suit in a nice kitchen, and she knows how to do her hair suddenly, and like wears a bold red lip. And it's only through the course of the pilot that I really wanted to mess with that image and get to this place where she idealizes her future in that last fantasy sequence, but she looks how she looks, she is where she is, and her fantasy is killing her husband, not changing him. And the sort of basis of the show is that saying, like, men get married to women thinking they'll stay the same, women get married to men thinking they'll change. And this is just like a very passive-aggressive, very exaggerated version of that phrase. And I think that that's actually not even what she wants, but it's something that she can look at and move towards, in a goal that actually gives her some agency for the first time in her life. And that's sort of intoxicating, is like actually doing something for herself. And weirdly, in trying to kill her husband, she builds a life around it that suddenly she didn't have before. And I think that that's sort of the inner life I want to bring out more.
Yeah, you're watching an awakening, which is very exciting to see and to watch.
So.
We
tried.
It is. So we kind of touched on this a little bit, but I want to kind of talk about transitions, like the transitions in and out of things on both shows, and the kind of the stylisticness of that, as well as your relationship with your DP, because I feel like that's a very symbiotic relationship on every show, but certainly when you're coming in and out and doing these match cuts and this and that. So I guess just speak a little bit about you and your DP's relationship.
Well, I mean, I guess it changes, and even in my features, I work with different DPs. Sure. But in TV, you definitely do. And the thing I learned, like when you're doing features, indie, is mainly what I did until this last one. The DP has tons of time, and they want to just sit down and go through every shot, and you're just like, oh, God. But it's great, because when you're in TV, nobody does that. It's all on you, and you've got to get the coverage, and you've got to know, and sometimes you've got to push a very tired DP to get it. And that's, and you want to make sure you're not doing too much. You want the options, but yeah. So I think that it's really what you said about what you want somebody to feel, or an audience to feel. When I was teaching film at various places, that's one of the things that I would use for my own work and to pass on is, when I'm working on a scene, what do I want people to feel instead of what do I want them to know? And the DP on Dickinson, I remembered I was trying to describe this shot, and he was like, well, just tell me what you want it to feel like. And it was a great shorthand. I pull references all the time. Visuals, I'll do just Google Slides. And I'll pull them just because it's weird. Even I've worked in film for a while, and I went and studied it as well, but it's like the idea of an extreme close-up, the idea of a certain angle, it's really, a visual just helps, like lock it in. And so, yeah, I think that's another way that I work with the DP, is to give them references that are in the visual language so that we're not getting caught up in the technical language of it all. And yeah.
And do you have to, obviously you're presenting that to him. Do you also present that to whatever writers are on set or producers are on set, or are they seeing that sort of at the monitor while it's happening? What's that?
I would do that with the showrunner or the producing writer that might be working with me. With Dickinson, for the last season, I was in the writer's room through the whole season, and I was on the whole season of season 3, overseeing with the rest of the directors and stuff. So yeah, but I did show those to, it depends on the show. Sometimes the showrunner's really busy, you just show it to the producing writer. But yeah, and you're always just trying to steal time. Yeah. On TV, you're just trying to grab. I just reach out to all the actors and reach out to the DP, and you just try to get any minute offset that you can, because it's gold, and you just want to build that trust, because then you try stuff that might not work. Because my goal is always to try something that doesn't work. If we can get what we need first and then fuck up a take.
And what about you when the DP on your show?
I got very lucky. My DP, I've known him since I was born. We needed someone, and our DP dropped out over COVID before we started shooting. And my aunt married my DP's brother. And that was when I was a kid, and it was always like, oh, Adrian's in movies. Go talk to Adrian at like block parties. And he was a PA who did not want to talk to me. I was 19 years younger than he was. But I'd watched his career, and he had just done such beautiful work. He had just done the 2nd season of Glow, which I had my favorite shot of 2018, which is Betty Gilpin sitting on a floor of her empty house singing Home on the Range. And I was like, please come to our show. And he had this beautiful presentation and really got both sides, and hadn't done multicam, but I'd rather have a single camera DP who hasn't done multicam learn that than the other way around. And he just had such a wonderful artistic way of looking at things. And we have to match very closely those transitions. And that means it's not just on him, it's on every department. Set deck became incredibly important. It's like, well, where was the hamburger pencil holder? And because the slightest change, it's such a big swing that to really keep people on board, you have to make it seamless, because the rest isn't. It's jarring on purpose. So our script supervisor was incredible. We had 2, and they were both they took it very, very seriously. Hair, makeup, it's all about continuity and making things, because that way when lighting and camera angles and you jump line, like that way you buy that. And so and this year we bumped up our A camera operator to DP, and her name is Shannon Madden. She's fantastic, and she really knew the look of the show, and knew the language, knew what we wanted to go for. So that was invaluable. And I think, we did not reinvent the wheel on multicam. We tried to make a straight-ahead sitcom. We all love sitcoms in the writer's room. Like, we didn't want to look down on it or make fun of it. We truly tried to make a good, funny sitcom, because if you're winking at it, making fun of it, I don't know how I ask you to watch that for half of the show. So we wanted to do all of that kind of by the book, and that meant when we were in single camera that we could, have it be dark. We love when stuff is a little dark and we don't see people's faces all that well, because that is so different from multicam. Extreme wides, making sure that it's clear that we're outside, anything to differentiate it from that sitcom, we really tried to identify and use.
You kind of brought up the idea in this producing director role, bringing in other directors, and sort of obviously they have watched the show and whatnot, but they're stepping in and pretty quickly going to be shooting your show. There's not a lot of prep time when you come on as a one-off episodic director. So talk through maybe because for these folks tone meetings and kind of what that process is when you are moving on to the next episode and it's somebody brand new to your show coming in.
Well, it was a eye-opening moment because I'm often the director that comes in and I do my thing and hopefully it goes well. But it's like throwing a party in somebody else's house. You're just you're not exactly part of the family yet. But always there's that over-managing, person on set. And I wasn't that, but I could really understand why, because these were things that I had worked on and developed and in some cases shot, because we block shot some of the season. And but I was aware of it, and it was I had a good relationship with the director, so I was just like, what do you think about this idea? I didn't step on any toes, but I could feel what often writers must feel when they have all these directors coming in. And I'm a collaborator, but some of those old-time directors aren't, and I just don't know how they got away with it, because it's the people that create the show know the show. They know all the details of the whole season. I really focus on, that, but also my episodes. And so yeah, that was interesting, but it was also a great opportunity to get people in through the gates, because the truth is Hollywood talks a big talk about wanting to make change, but it's really hard to get them to do the work. And so that's just something they got to catch up on. But yeah, so that was a great opportunity to get to bring on directors. Some it was their first TV directing job, but they had done other work, features, and they were just a great fit for the show, mainly the tone. And but yeah, so I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did, absolutely.
Yeah.
I never thought of a producing director as a nice insurance policy in being able to hire people who networks often will not approve. And if you can basically guarantee their episode, that must be super helpful.
It's a little nerve-wracking too.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
No, but
it's the
great.
same with promoting writers,
Yeah.
You basically just have to guarantee their scripts, but on my end anyways, it's not nearly as daunting, because you're always, adjusting and rewriting. It's probably a lot harder to step in and be like, you are opening up a new access, please don't do that. That'll be 3 more setups.
No, it's true. It's a weird, TV too, they'll let you get yourself in trouble,
Yeah.
They'll let you go, and if you run overtime, that's not great for the show. And but if you don't get the scene, that's also not great for the show.
Yeah.
It might be a show that would rather you run over than not get the scene. Every show has a different kind of vibe, and but yeah, it is about making sure that you know what the scene is, and but bringing in new people. I feel like it is starting to change, and they're definitely, because they're saying the words, I get to put them on the hook. Even with the feature that I'm doing now, there were certain things that I was like, well, here's where you build equity. Here's where you make change. This is where you do the work instead of say the words, and they went for it and allowed me to cast certain ways that I really wanted to. So they're on the hook. We can start pushing.
For Kevin, we had Oz Rodriguez do the pilot in the second episode, and we wanted to bring him back, but then he very quickly got a deal with Universal, so we couldn't, and he deserved it, but I was still very bummed. And so we had Anna DeCosa ready for the second block, and then we were going to figure it out. And very slowly, I was just like, can we keep Anna? Can we please just keep Anna for the next block? And they'd be like, yeah. And I kept doing it. So she did, of our 16 episodes, did 14 of them. But
you did one.
I did the
that's
series
great.
finale.
See, writers, I think, always seem to not, or be intimidated by the directing. I'm like, you're directing all the time.
I was like, I don't know how to do that. That's not my, and also I'm brand new. I was, a story editor when I sold the show. So I was like, I don't know how to do that. And then one day early on, my script supervisor came to me and said, you need to direct. And I was like, I don't know, Sheila. And she said, well, you just did it, so you probably should. And I was, really? And she said, yeah, that camera angle you said that you wanted, and talking to the actors the way you do, that's it. And so I was like, okay. And to be able to do the series finale was incredible, probably the best therapy I could have asked for in terms of,
Poetic.
and getting saying goodbye to the show. But Anna did 14 of the 16 or something, 12 of the 16, and considering it was COVID and scary and asking people to come to Boston and not do anything. She was so on board. She knew the show. She knew both formats. She knew the actors. She is one of the most collaborative people I've ever gotten to work with. She wanted to know what I wanted to feel from a scene. Mm-hmm. She super cared when I said, can you not have them ad-lib that because that steps on something I'm writing 4 episodes from now. And that was just invaluable to me. And she was our co-EP on the 2nd season, earned every bit of that title. And I don't know about working with different people because I didn't do it.
It's fabulous. But yeah, Elena did the finale episode for Dickinson season 3, and she was like, I'm not gonna do it. I was like, you're doing it. You gotta do it. She's like, I need you by my side by day 2. She's like, I don't need you around me. And I was like, I knew you had it. And so it's the weird language around, I don't know, it's the Holy Grail. You know, one thing I really did love when Soloway got nominated for an Emmy for Transparent and was at the DGA, and they let people come up and speak. This is before they won, and they were saying, directing's easy. People doing things I didn't write and didn't direct them to do, that's hard. And it was just like so fun to watch these old guys just be like, no, you're not supposed to say that. That secret is supposed to be well kept. But the thing is, like, the story originator is the one who knows the story the most. And so, I think often there's the writer. Yeah, they separate the writer from the director, and it just adds more distance potentially. But yeah.
Let's kind of pull back for a minute and not necessarily maybe talk about your specific shows, but just like, are there other shows that you either maybe are a fan of or can look to or point to that use kind of this, like, either going into like another realm or time or mind or some sort of a stylistic device that you think did it really well, that you're like, man, they nailed that because...
Well, I would say, I especially since wrapping the show, watch everything. I watch everything. And right now, what I really, really love, and it's not exactly like surreal, but I think they use a bunch of different, almost genres in the same show so well, is Gaslit. I was watching it, and I'm also watching The Offer, not because I like it, but because I watch everything. And if I was only watching The Offer, I think I would say something as sweeping as, like, we shouldn't make TV about already famous things. Watching characters come up with things we already know is not as enticing as they seem to think it is. And then but Gaslit makes me think otherwise. It's so funny. Mostly because Betty Gilpin exists, but it's so good, and it's funny. It is intriguing. I always thought of those Watergate burglars or break-in guys as like masterminds, and they are idiots. And it's so funny watching people realize it. But then there's also an episode where Julia Roberts is like held captive in her hotel room essentially, and it's like a horror movie. I mean, it is shot so well and so tense, and I covered my eyes all in the same show, and I think they do period really, really well. That's the thing I'm I guess most into right now.
That's cool.
I'm not watching much TV, unfortunately, but I'm going to as soon as I finish my film. But so I guess I do enjoy using genre and anything as a metaphor, just any thematic as, like, you could have a movie that's about class that's played as a vampire movie, or, in a way you wouldn't know as vampire. It could be just like subtext, and there's a lot of ways to subvert tropes. That's always my thing is, okay, here we think we're going one way, let's turn that the other way, because I do believe we don't have to keep showing the same things, even if they're real, because there's anomalies that are just as real, we just don't show those. And and I think surreal or experimental is not, I'm not necessarily an experimental person. I just think my lens is a bit that way because of whatever my experience is. I see cracks in the facade or things that show me that perhaps things are more performative than organic. So, I think it's out of necessity, and I think that's kind of something we're talking about is like all those tricks are really character driven. Like, what does a character need in that moment? What are they willing to do? And how close are we as an audience to them is what that function works, serves well.
And if it's not that, then I think it's gimmicky.
Yeah.
And you can kind of smell that very, very fast.
Oh, yeah.
And there is, the worst version of my show is a gimmick. And when I thought of it, I was like, well, that is what that is. What's behind it that makes it worthwhile and worth telling? And that's the hard part. Like that's because the other part, the other part just makes a good log line. And then beyond that, you got to figure out why it should be longer than a scene, and it should be a whole movie or show.
Yeah, I mean, humans are we're delusional. We're willing to do anything, to hold on to certain ideals that are not true. And I find that fascinating. I don't judge it. I actually connect to it. So I think, again, that's maybe how you make it longer lasting, is you connect to it instead of judge it, or look at it from afar.
I want to, we have like 15, 20 minutes. I want to open it up to some questions before we get too far now. Yes, right here.
Hi. First, just want to say thank you for spending time with us this afternoon. Valerie, my question's for you. I really love the show. I've been tracking it since
You're the viewer I have.
He's in the front row.
I've been tracking it since 2018. So I really was waiting for it, and it really just nailed everything I hoped it would be.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, first of all, what was the process assembling your writer's room? Obviously, as you said, this is meant to be a sitcom and not a sitcom, wink. But also, obviously, as you said, it's also playing in that world of Breaking Bad or, similar genre shows. So I was wondering if you could talk about how do you find essentially two writers' rooms and make them work cohesively?
Yeah, that was, it was a challenge, or I thought it would be a challenge. I keep saying next time I'm going to make one show, because two is very hard. But I think what we found across the board is people who care about character do not necessarily only live in comedy or drama. And luckily, so many shows go back and forth between, I would hire anybody from Hacks to work on a drama. They know character, But what was most important, we found out in terms of drama writers, that they didn't look down on comedy, because a lot of drama writers do because they can't do it. And so they sort of sneer at it, especially a sitcom. Sitcoms are so hacky by now, but they don't have to be. I gave every writer a list of shows to watch, a lot of episodes of Frasier. We do have Perry Gilpin on Can Fuck Himself this year, which I plutzed. I just died that day. She was awesome. Because there are great sitcoms, and it takes incredible, very, very precise hard writing. So that was for drama. For comedy, I cared that people would be vulnerable in the writer's room, because a lot of comedy rooms are competitive, one-upsmanship, stuff like that, which terrifies me. I don't do any of that. A comedy room, I don't think I'd last. And so I wanted people who were funny and would make me laugh, but that's not the point of the room. And I needed them to be able to tell stories that were hard to tell, that maybe they'd never had to in a room before. And the people we found on both sides absolutely did that. And it was really by this, because we had so many writers' rooms, it's been so long. But by the fourth writer's room, we really nailed it as to what we wanted. And another thing that I'm proud of that we did is, we would promote people. And not just because I think people should be promoted regardless, but because our writer's assistant became our staff writer for season 2. And that was the chance someone gave me on SEAL Team on CBS. That was my first writing gig ever.
Same show.
A lot, yeah, right. A lot of copy that, but that gave me my entire career. And so finding people who understood the show, wanting to keep them around, that was true with every department, but definitely with the room.
And don't you find that the writers, the new, the networks and the streamers need them as much as they need the job. It's to stay relevant and things are changing. It's actually really, I feel I spend a lot of time just trying to protect shows from themselves, or they're probably trying to protect me from the show, but you know, it goes back and forth. But yeah, it does seem like it's a really important shift in terms of just keeping relevant with TV.
Anybody else have a question for these folks? Yes.
Continuing with genre, and thank you. So continuing about genre, I'm wondering if you had decided to yourself before you assembled the room what genre your show was going to be, and if assembling the room maybe you second guessed that, or based on which people you assembled, whether they might have tried to like massage it in one direction or another, because these concepts could have gone in many different directions. So like, how do you decide what genre it should be? Is it based on the material or based on what you like to write? And then how much might that have changed?
Is that for you?
Oh, okay. I went in knowing nothing, or deciding nothing. I think in my head I said it's a drama with comedic elements because that's what made me feel most safe. Because as I said, comedy rooms scared the hell out of me. And I think what we found is like it kind of depends on the episode. I would say that broadly, I think we're a drama masquerading as a comedy. I mean, it's brightly lit. It looks like a sitcom. I spent, half of my life the last 5 years writing hard sitcom jokes, which I never ever thought I would. And it was a pleasure. But I think because all of that serves character and serves the single camera portion, which I also try to make funny, just not like hard joke funny. I want people to be weird and people, and I think just by nature of where I grew up, I find people hilarious just being who they are. And those are the characters I wanted to write and wanted to see. So I don't know whether or not, I mean, the network was like, are we a comedy or a drama? How do you want to submit? I was like, submit. But also, I think we're actually in the drama category because I also wanted people to know that like, it's character based. And I think that that's doing a disservice to comedy. But I think that the notions are so antiquated about both that I wanted to make sure people know, like, I'm trying to tell stories about people I find interesting, not make dick jokes.
Yeah. I mean,
Not only make dick jokes.
good distinction. I would say because I was often in the writers' room with Transparent, and they were making a different writers' room, and that's part of how I got in. Is some of my friends were brought on who had no TV writing experience, were poets and depressive comedians, and really, comedy is higher stakes, not lower stakes, and so that was really cool to see. And then with Dickinson, definitely it was a very well thought out in terms of the different voices. We had Lynn Nottage in the room, and new writers who wrote. One person was hired because they wrote a spec script for Dickinson and actually got hired, which never happens. That never happens. And so it's really, I love that mix. I love the like new and the experience and the different points of view. And when I did my first episode on Transparent, instead of my buddy, I was paired with this guy. I'm like, oh, we're like totally opposite. This is gonna be terrible. And we're BFFs since. It's really like those different points of view in a room is what I think is really beneficial, because if it's a good room, you're gonna bring up the things that the show needs. And so yeah.
Anybody else? Yes.
I was just curious for both of you, because both of these ideas are so cool, but at every phase of moving forward, you can see the look on people's faces of being like, oh, that's really weird. And how did you sort of keep like committed to the idea that like, no, we're really, for Dickinson, we're really tethered to the poems and to her interior life, and we actually don't care about what you think the 1860s were like, or we're really committed to telling the story this way, to not have the edges shaved off when you were meeting other people's sort of discomfort with how, you said weird earlier, but in a way how weird it is to move the envelope forward.
Constantly
Which I'm thrilled about.
Weird's my brand, totally.
I remember like deep into the first season, I was like, how many times do I have to defend the soul of the show? I thought I'd done it for the last time, like 6 months ago. And you you have to do it a lot until you kind of have, for me, it was like a cut. Once there was a cut and people saw what I had hoped would make sense, that's when it really kind of sunk in, and that's when I didn't have to have those conversations what felt like every week. And I don't blame anybody for having those conversations with me, because there's a lot of money on the line and they want to make sure it works. And you know, a note I get often is like, can you cut down the multicam? Can you like put Kevin in single camera? It's like, well, what's the show? Can you tell me what the show is if we take that out? Because no, you just have to. It has to be earned. Like I didn't just throw Neil in the single camera for fun. There's like a reason in my brain that's why he is in it now.
Did you know that was where it was going?
No, originally the first season ended with him dying in that scene. And then we cast. Wow, you guys have actually.
Maybe you should have died.
No, and then we cast Alex Bonifer, who is one of those guys who, like, if you watch Friends, you realize, like, oh my God, those actors did so much of the work for them. Yes. Like, and they did beautiful writing too, but I mean, Chandler makes a look and you get a laugh, and it's like, oh God, I just get to write Chandler does a look? That's great. Like that, and Alex is that guy. And so early on, Craig, my co-showrunner, and I, he was like, Valerie, we can't kill him off. And I was like, yes, we can. It's good. That's what's been in my brain for 3 years. He's like, okay. But I'm telling you, we would do Zoom table reads, and he would, during the pandemic, just to like keep in touch, and he would kill it. And he'd be like, Valerie. And I'd be like, it's a good end. And then I said, fine. If I can think of an end that I like as much, then maybe. And also, when it became clear, like, we might actually get a second season, none of us wanted a dead body season. I hate a dead body. It's the worst. It's like I'm just waiting for them to get caught, and then it's the worst. And so it's like, okay. And I sat down, and I was like, it's better. It's better, and I don't have to tell an actor he's not coming back. And so when we talked to Alex, like in our preseason, just chat about what season 1 would be, we were like, by the way, you're supposed to die at the end of this, but you're so good that we couldn't. He cried. He is the sweetest, and watching him just come to life in single camera this year was a joy. I don't remember what the question was.
The question was about the weirdness and like constant like selling people over and over again that it's gonna work.
Yeah, no, it does work. I've been fortunate enough to work on a couple of weird shows that have been impactful, or if that's a word, like Transparent for Amazon. It definitely put them on the map, and they never did a show like that after. And Dickinson also was a kind of important show, even though they had bigger shows, because it was the only one that got consistent good reviews. Mm-hmm. And then I do have to be a little bit negative in that I don't see them make those same decisions again. I think they do it because they don't know the rules, and so that's exciting. They're like, bring us something we haven't seen, and then they get success, and then it seems like they just want to get some dragons in a show and make a lot of money. But that'll change. I don't want to be ill. And but
new network will happen, and they'll do interesting things again.
Yeah. No, and actually, yeah. To be fair, all the places that I've worked for have been decent, and really they hear things. It's not the same. It's not the thing you would think, which is just crushing the soul of the filmmaker, show creator.
I have a quick follow-up. For the pitch, did you have anything visual in the pitch?
I have the most annoying story of how I sold this
Oh God. Were you like in a supermarket?
No,
got
not
discovered?
quite. Not quite. I was a writer on SEAL Team.
Copy that.
Copy that. Over now. My old boss, I finished there. My old boss, Amy Littman, asked me to. You did.
So the show with her.
She was a real champion of mine and asked me to come be in an AMC mini room of hers as a writer. And AMC was like, who's that? She's worked on SEAL Team. Let's at least meet her. And so I had a general where, you just drink water and talk about where you're from and make jokes about trashy Connecticut. And 2 hours before the meeting, my manager, brand new manager, called me and said, so I guess they just read your script. now the meeting's about buying Kevin. Do you have anything prepared? And I was like, no, Brandy, this is my third meeting ever. I have nothing prepared for a series. And she's like, great.
Expect this to happen to
No,
you.
no. She was like, great, go have fun. And so I sat, my meeting was supposed to be with one person. Suddenly it was with four. A room full of women, which was amazing. And I remember a woman, Carrie, who's now, I love her so much, but she said, so what do you see for the second season? And I said, I don't know, maybe you throw like another format in there, maybe, I don't know, like local access or something. And she's like, she literally said, yeah, I was afraid you were going to say something like that. And I was like, great, I'll go fuck myself. Thank you so much for meeting with me. And then, this is the most annoying story. 3 weeks later, it was my first night ever in Paris. And I got
It's a terrible story.
I got a call from my whole team, brand new team. And usually that means you're fired. And I wasn't on anything at the moment. And they said, so AMC wants to put in an offer on Kevin. And I was like,
Stop.
What? An offer?
Like I was standing
Like
under the Eiffel
money?
Tower at the moment.
And, throughout that whole process, for months later, I wrote like the format on my own and had a great time, like a series Bible. And the whole time people are like, so when can I see it? And I was like, oh, it'll never get made. It'll never get made. And somehow it got made.
Wow.
It's awful.
It's amazing.
It'll never happen that way again.
I have many unmakeable shows, and so far they've not been made. Could be made.
Just piss off someone in a general, and apparently you can get a show made.
Oh yeah, that definitely. They like when you say, I got my first writing job by saying this is an impossible thing to adapt.
Yeah.
And they're like, you're hired. But yeah, that's great.
We'll all leave remembering that story. Anybody else have a question for these two? Oh, you go. Oh, commit.
A short question.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier you made a list of sitcom episodes to give to your writing staff. Is there a way I could access that list?
I'll ask my brother to tweet it. I'm not on any social media, but I would say there's a French farce episode of Frasier that I tell everyone to watch. It's called, I think, The Two Mrs. Cranes. I think it's season 4, episode 1. I'm not positive about that. But they did French farce so well, and it's what we referenced a lot when talking about our 6th episode of Kevin.
It's weird. I grew up in these like Norman Lear. Yeah, where it's like sitcom covered everything. It covered, religion, abortion, race, class. Like that was a sitcom.
Yeah.
I feel like I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask anyways and see what happens. So I think last week it was announced that Erin Hayes is going to be in the 2nd season of the show, which brings this very full circle. Is there anything that you can reveal about her involvement, or is I'm asking, I'm taking the opportunity because you do have a drink in your hand, so.
I think I can say this confidently that it doesn't give anything away. She's in the series finale. She's in our finale.
Okay.
And was amazing. I loved working with her so much.
Back there.
I have a question.
Hi, Jen. That's my music supervisor.
Hi.
Oh, hey.
Well, I have to ask about Dickinson, and of course about the music, because I love the music. Was that something to have, like, the contemporary music? Was that originally part of the format going in?
Yeah, no, it was in the pilot right away, and it was playing with a lot of things, right? A lot of things around appropriating certain musics and, and making it feel like people are people in the past and now. And even in the opera episode, we have Ella on stage translating Emily Dickinson poem into a song, and I got to come in and work with Drum and Lace and the music people that we have, and they're phenomenal and kind of push it a little bit, and that's really exciting. It's a tall order, to put something like that to music. But yeah, I think it's very much design of the show. The music is really integrated as part of the way to have a connection to it that just bypasses all the historical stuff and
It really hit me in that, I think the third episode where the kids are having a party, and Lynn directed that, right?
I love that.
She's supposed to do our pilot.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but that episode was so, like, I was like, oh, they're just kids.
Yeah.
And it was because they were dancing like kids I knew, but it's such a shorthand. It's so great.
Yeah, because all we have is what was taken and stored by the people that had the power to archive and, you know, decide what we, so it is a great way to bypass certain things about the past that we don't want to connect to. But yeah, or want to connect to in a different way. But yeah, Lynn, there's a whole shot that's the Lynn Shelton shot, which is when the friends come in through the door. We couldn't shoot out that door because it was just like not a good.
Yeah.
So it became this thing that Lynn devised where they come in like one by one and present themselves in
Yes.
slow motion and face the camera. And I did one of those shots this last season, and it was definitely.
It feels very much present themselves.
Rated entrance, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Real quick question, we gotta wrap up.
Well, just about the music, I have not seen Dickinson. I know of it. I'm a recovering English teacher. Is there a possibility that you will do the Yellow Rose of Texas somehow with her poems?
Oh.
Because you've heard about the beats and the rhythm of the Yellow Rose. You can sing just about any Emily Dickinson poem to that tune.
Oh wow. No, but she has such a cadence, right? There's such a song. Yeah, it's a real thing.
Now he's gonna go pull it up and listen to it. We're really gonna get stuff going here.
I have this great idea. That's how it works. It's terrible. They ended. The show creator decided to end the show on season 3, even though they wanted to keep it going. Which was
Yeah, me too. Me too.
I can't wait to be in that position. But yeah, no, it's no, that's interesting. I am gonna look it up. But yeah.
2-hour movie.
There you go. Well, guys, we have to wrap it up. This was so fun and fascinating. Thank you both so much.